Awesome. So when we're looking at those specific values of actually how does the body change through this training, we need to keep in mind that once we apply the training stimulus to the individual, we get both structural effects and functional effects. Structural effects, specifically from resistance training, is going to be giving us muscle hypertrophy, which, makes you look cool. But what we're really looking for when we're working with athletes are those functional effects, which obviously motor learning is part of that, which is what Emily's asking us about, which is rate coding. So effectively, what we're getting is improved intramuscular coordination there, meaning we're sending more stimuli to the muscle. We're doing a better job of getting all those fibers to contract together. And because of that, we're going to be able to get a better force summation. Now, we're also going to have changes in, or he refers to as reflexive changes, because we have more signals for causing the contraction of muscles. We talk about the muscle spindle activation, along with less inhibitory signals, and that's coming from the antagonist and also from the Golgi tendon organ. Along with, we're going to have better inter-muscle coordination, so using the other muscles to produce that force to get that movement to occur. So when we're looking at resistance training, notice, and specifically power training, we're really trying to hype up the nervous system to be able to give us what we need. Now, when it comes to aerobic style training, you're going to become more efficient at the movement pattern, which means we're still going to have a neurological effect, but that neurological effect is going to be more towards specifically utilizing the muscles in the most efficient way. So we're not going to turn on any more musculature than we need to. We're going to use the bare minimum to effectively perform whatever we need to, and we're going to try to stay as aerobically as possible. So we're going to try to avoid tapping into those type 2 fibers when we talk about long-term training. Because when it comes to aerobic performance, remember guys, VO2 max is really useful. If we have a high VO2 max, we're going to be able to keep up a higher work output. But from there, we worry about that anaerobic threshold. So if we have a higher lactic threshold, we're going to be able to maintain a higher percentage of our VO2 max for a longer period of time. And so if we have this higher aerobic capacity for the VO2, higher anaerobic threshold, now if we then have a more efficient stride, aka if we put a gallon of gasoline in a giant, SUV that, somebody needs to get Johnny to soccer practice when the world was still working, and you put that same gallon of gasoline into a small efficient car, it turns out you're gonna be able to go much further on the same amount of fuel. So if we are more efficient, better aerobic capacity, better anaerobic tolerance and or threshold, we're going to have a better aerobic athlete. So does that answer your question, Emily?
Yes, thank you.
No, it's a good question. Thank you. So I told Emily and Tori to go ahead and put up their questions for me for the review. And then a hush went over the crowd with Tori. I guess if you need me to translate that into Canadian, I can try, but I'm not the most fluent in that. I'm really only fluent in 2 languages, and that's English and Bad English, and that's more Americanized. If you got a question about anything you'd like me to ask, I can do that, yeah? Nothing, Tori?
No, not right now.
Okay. Gracie, what type of questions you got for me?
So, this does have to do with like our class and like the nutrition part. So for athletes that are more like, say cross country, like where they're doing long distance type running, or even not as much track, because I see them in the weight room, like more like they lift a little bit more. But, so like if you're running long distance, how important is it to, like, for example, drink a protein shake afterwards? Like, I know when we work out, there's protein shakes because we like just did a lot of like resistance training and like using like a lot of muscles with like heavy weight and stuff. But, and I know like you're working your muscles when you're running, but like how much protein do you need? Like, is it important to like get that protein in after that run? Just like it's important to get the protein in after like a heavy lift?
Good question. Now, let's first, I'm gonna, let's work through this a little bit together. So Gracie, I know you like to run on occasion. are your legs, are your muscles, are your joints, are your tendons ever sore after a long run?
Maybe if I haven't ran in a while, like if I took a break off and then ran, but like at home, I've been running quite a bit,
Mhm.
and I'm normally not very sore after a run, except for the other day. I decided I was going to run 5 miles because I was bored, and it took me
Mhm.
about a week to recover. So,
Okay, okay. So like anything else, we got the stimulus that's going to drop that performance down, and then we're trying to recover so we can super compensate and perform again. Okay. Now, with that distance running, okay, part of it's muscular damage. Obviously, that's where protein is pretty useful for. But what's the major depletion that's going on in those muscle cells from the long distance running?
glycogen,
Bingo. Glycogen. How do we replenish glycogen?
carbs.
Bingo. So post workout, protein is obviously useful for any athlete, and that's why protein demands for resistance training athletes is higher than it is for aerobic athletes. But aerobic athletes still have higher protein demands than sedentary individuals. Sedentary individuals are sitting, it looks about 0.8 grams per kilogram of body mass per day. Aerobic athletes about 1.2 to 1.5. Strength trained athletes go from about 1.5 to over 2. There's some research that would argue up to 2.5, but that's for a resistance training athlete that's trying to not lose their lean mass while they're in a caloric deficit. So
Mm.
from there, protein actually has a pulsatile effect, meaning we want to do a bolus of it and then let it digest. Then we go a little bit, catabolic. Then we do another bolus of it and then catabolic, bolus of it, catabolic. So if you're doing 3 to 4, and the research really shows really once you go over like 5 meals a day of that big protein, it's not really giving you much more. Now, for most of these athletes, specifically if you got to go on a long run, are you going to eat a big meal right before you run, Gracie?
No.
No. So, you probably had your last meal of real size, like at least 2 hours or more away from it. Maybe you've done a small snack that's mostly like a simple carbohydrate that's easy to digest. So you're probably at the point anyways where you really want to have another bolus of protein to help, accrue mass or at least optimize recovery. So first and foremost, the carbohydrate demand is going to be the bigger one. If you only can choose, you run with a banana or a sad can of tuna fish, pick the banana if you're a distance runner. But in a perfect world, you're trying to do both of those post workout, or at least, close enough after that workout, especially with a bigger bolus of carbs. The research shows about a 3-to-1 to a 4-to-1 ratio of carbohydrates to protein intake post workout tends to really help with replenishing that glycogen so they're going to be able to train again at a higher intensity and effectively sooner rather than later.
Okay.
Sound good?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, there's always the solution, just don't run. Just throwing that out there. All right. So let's go ahead. Abby Capoza, what type of questions can I help you with on the review?
Right now I don't really have anything. Just kind of listening. Thanks
Okay.
for being.
No, that's fine. That's fine. Like anything else, I'm trying to help you guys going on through it. Okay. Brent, any questions I can answer for you, bud?
Really nothing specific. It's kind of like what Abby said, just kind of listening in and just kind of taking everything in.
Okay. Okay. Sounds good. All right. Courtney, anything I can walk through for you?
Not really. I've just been reading
Okay.
through the PowerPoints, trying to answer my own questions.
Okay. And then I guess that brings us to last but not least, Jake, if you got any questions I can answer for you, and then Emily and Tori.
Um,
Go ahead.
I have one. So on the topic of like blood flow restriction,
Mhm.
so can you go into like the recovery side of it? Because I know like it can be used to like build muscle, but is that
Mhm.
like the recovery side of it, or does it have like other benefits besides like just like because I was reading something yesterday about like BFR and like people kind of use it when they squat to like build atrophy or hyper.
Yeah, to avoid atrophy and build hypertrophy. Okay. No.
Yeah.
So first, let's really go into talking about blood flow restriction training, BFR. Now, this is where you're purposely going to put like the tighter, usually it's a cuff that actually regulates the blood pressure. So you're getting systolic blood flow to the limb, but you're not getting diastolic return to the heart. And so it's usually put on the upper arm or like up high on the thighs near the hips. And what that in turn is going to do is it still allows oxygen to go to the area. So you're not going straight up, effectively, tourniqueted off, no blood flow. Now you really risk tissue necrosis because there's no oxygen, so it's going to die and fall off. However, you're not able to clear those metabolic byproducts as quickly or really much at all. I've added actually back into my own training program because I love pain and I'm trying to figure out a way to make my quad sore without making my knees hurt, which is, it's a fun challenge. It sucks. But the basic idea is you're now having all that lactate can't go anywhere. And the lactate's not the problem, guys. Remember, it's that proton that comes with it that drops the pH. So the pH around those muscle cells keeps just dive bombing. Along with, we got a lot more carbon dioxide in the area. You're probably getting a little bit more nitric oxide signaling. And those metabolic byproducts are actually signaling molecules to increase muscle mass. So effectively in the lit, it really seems to come down to you have 4 different ways to signal for muscle mass. The first is just straight up mechanical tension. So we literally put enough tension on the line that we are causing those fibers to be activated, that it's like, okay, we need to maintain this muscle mass. The second being the total amount of work you're doing. So that's why pretty much most of the research really shows that if you do 1 set to failure, you do get progress because you've made the body do a certain amount of work. But if you do 2 sets, you get even more progress. If you do 3 sets, you get even more progress than 1 and 2. And it peaks out at some point, but the idea is the more work you do, you're going to build the muscle mass. Third being those metabolic byproducts. So if we get those to accumulate, and that's where high rep like pump work, there's a reason you chase that pump, A, because it makes you look swole, but B, because it actually helps, it's literally causing that signaling that's going to occur to help with increasing muscle mass size. And that signaling also is going to cause the release of insulin-like growth factor, IGF-1, if I remember correctly. And that also helps increase tendon thickness and ligament thickness. So the idea is by doing BFR, you're getting one of those major signaling processes to help increase muscle mass and specifically connective tissue strength and integrity without also having the added mechanical damage from those heavy loads. And I mean, it turns out, like I tore my pec off the bone because I was doing heavy weight with, moderate to high reps, and it was more than those connective tissues could tolerate, and they snapped right off. It was actually really cool. I got to watch a seminar this weekend of a gentleman who's a physical therapist. He showed a video of somebody snapping their calf tendon on a sprint from the behind you. You literally saw it roll up, which was mildly nauseating. But the analogy is effectively your tendons and your muscles are held together with Velcro. So they usually, if you grab, if you put Velcro straps together and you pull them across each other, they don't really move. But if you lift them up and then pull them, they tear right off. So when he showed the image, it was quite vulgar. But so when it comes to using the BFR, you can go ahead and get some of that hypertrophic response. And I've seen it with the athletes at EKU that have come back from different surgeries and had to do large rounds of BFR through DEXA values of them really bringing that lean mass back quickly. So it definitely does work with helping improve function and connective tissue seaming integrity also. The key is it's obviously very uncomfortable, and then it's obviously a bit involved to get everything set and get everything running for it. It's something if you wanted to experiment with on your own or with your athletes in certain capacities, it's just the technology needs to become a little bit more wearable, and that you can just put on the cuff, turn it on and then auto regulates, as opposed to having like the IV bag you bring back with you, or doing the blue collar one where you put on the leg wraps, which is what I do, and then you have to have it just tight enough but not too tight. And there's a bit of a learning curve there, and honestly, they're not the most comfortable. But you know, I think it's fascinating. I don't think it's a panacea that, you know, certain folks would have you believe, but at the same time, it is an interesting tool in the toolbox. And also, because I haven't touched on it yet, the fourth major factor is hormones for increasing lean mass. So it turns out being male naturally affords you more muscle mass on average than being female because of testosterone. And then you have things like androgen receptor sensitivity, you've got endogenous production, and you've got a lot of other hormones like that insulin growth factor, human growth hormone, insulin sensitivity, insulin production, all of which are going to influence your lean mass size. Man. Any other questions that you guys have for me that I can go ahead and directly field? So we talked a little bit last week about, you know, going through those assignments, guys. You got to make sure you fully think the questions through. When we talk about adaptations to the system, that means the entire system. And so you need to think about, once again, the entire system and not just focus on one component of it. So the cardiovascular system was the one that a lot of people messed up on, which is they would only highlight the heart, or in cardiopulmonary, or they only highlight the lungs. Well, it turns out it's made up of the lungs, the heart, the blood vessels, and the blood. And then within that area, the subfractions that are going to be important for performance. When the endocrinology comes up, endocrinology is a whole lot of glands and a whole lot of systems that are working together effectively to, you know, give you the best possible performance. So that's anything from your stress hormones to your sex hormones, to your blood sugar regulation, to your resting metabolic rate, to your hydration. All of those are going to influence performance and recovery. So you have to look at it from the holistic effect of, it's not look at an individual tree. I have no interest in you guys doing fill in the blank exams or going through and, you know, writing in a missing word on my PowerPoint slide. I have everything on the fact that you guys can apply this information and really think through some of these more complicated questions. So, Haley, I know you're just popping in. I've just kind of been answering whatever questions people have. Is there anything that I can go ahead and field for you?
Not right now that I can think of.
Okay, okay. So, go ahead. Got to click around because, of course, got all these different tabs open of, you know, pictures of cats on the internet. So let's go ahead and finally share the screen. Okay. So, our happy little slide over here for specifically, you know, thinking our way through all the chapters. Now, when we're talking about adaptations to resistance training and adaptations to energy systems training, so aerobic and anaerobic style training, let's think about the principles of training. What's probably the first thing that we should think about when it comes to those athletes? Oh, I know what I was going to do.
Can you repeat the question? You kind of cut out.
No worries. Drat. Supposedly, there's a whole thing for how to do a poll inside of your presentations, and shucks. I guess my version of it doesn't have it. Okay, so when we're looking at any training, resistance training, energy systems training, aka aerobic and anaerobic style training, what's the first principle of training that we should probably think about for that athlete?
Specificity?
Yeah, specificity. Good, Gracie. Why is that?
Because like that's going to benefit them the most. There's no point in a softball player doing a ton of soccer conditioning when that's not specific to their sport.
Good. So now here's the thing. Let's keep going with the soccer player and the softball player analogy, because I think it's good in that obviously the energy systems are pretty different. But in the weight room, what do both of those athletes definitely have in common?
We squat a lot.
Why? What do you guys have in common? Like, what do you think needs wise?
Well, softball players, a lot of their power is coming from their lower half, whereas like soccer players, they use their legs for the entirety of their sport.
Do you ever run on your hands in softball?
No.
So now let's go back and just think about that specificity. What's the big thing that both those sports have in common?
We use our legs.
As your primary form of locomotion, right?
Yes.
Move.
Yes.
See? Do we?
You broke out.
Okay. Sorry, my internet is not great. So when you're looking at the fact that both soccer players and softball players run around on their legs in their sport, now why do we have them squat?
Because
Oh.
no, go ahead, Jake.
I would say to like strengthen like muscles and ligaments and tendons in the area, so their risk for injury goes down.
Yeah, one is exactly that. Actually, thank you for bringing that up, Jake. First and foremost, your major goal of being a strength and conditioning coach is to keep your athlete healthy and on the field. So decreasing injury risk should always be at the forefront of your mind. And then obviously the second is to increase said performance. So, if 2 takes away from number 1, you probably shouldn't be doing it. But if it improves both 1 and 2, you should definitely be doing it. And if it doesn't help 1 or 2, then why are you doing it? Other than because it hurts. But that's the type of nonsense from the previous head strength coach at Alabama. By the way, Google Buddy Morris, and he's a strength conditioning coach for the Phoenix Cardinals, and his opinion on, I believe the gentleman's name was Scott Cochran. I agree with him. I just don't want to say it to my students. But, okay, so that's why we're going to go ahead and have them squat a lot. Okay, now when it comes to upper body training, how is that going to be different between the soccer and the softball player?
The soccer player isn't going to use their arms near as much as the softball player, obviously.
Wouldn't you want to do more like push like lifts with them, because like in soccer you like push off and you kind of do that motion?
But then you also want to make sure that you've got good structural symmetry and balance in the upper body. And you do have to remember with soccer, you still have the throw in, which is effectively an aggressive pullover with a tricep extension. So, but now let's talk about core movements. Core, think about the way that you use your core when it comes to force production in your sport between a softball player and a soccer player. What's the key difference?
Softball is more like rotational movement.
Bingo. Softball, when you think about when you throw the ball, and then especially when you're swinging the bat, that is rotational power. Now, obviously, a lot of that is generated from the hips, but it's translated through the core. So if you have powerful hips and a weak core, you're literally not going to keep your shoulders up with your hip force production. So you can see that the foundation of the program between the soccer player and the softball player is very similar. They have to be powerful through the lower body. They have to be able to change direction. They have to be able to cover distances in a shorter period of time. They have to be able to jump to a certain extent. And then at the same time, now when we get to the upper body, things are different. We don't have anywhere near the same demands. We can emphasize things differently. And then obviously the energy system development is quite different. So if you're the strength conditioning coach and you have an hour to work with both teams, well, it turns out the first, let's say, half hour of just basic strength and warm-up is going to be very similar between those two teams. But that second half hour is going to be different because you're probably just going to do a little bit of upper body with the soccer players and then go and condition for maybe, say, the last 15, 20 minutes. Whereas with a softball player, you're going to spend that time developing the upper body strength and power along with the core stability to express it. Does that make sense to you guys of how we try to plan that out?
Yes.
Okay. Now, when it comes to the resistance training program, if our goal is to increase muscle mass, how do we need to be programming for that athlete? We'll just do CrossFit's workout of the day and figure it'll sort itself out.
Will we do like, I want to say like high volume, and then I don't know, I'm just throwing something out there.
No, it's okay. So the key to keep in mind there, guys, when we're trying to develop whatever physical aspects, be it strength, hypertrophy, endurance, or power, is it's going to coincide with certain rep ranges. And that also means certain efforts within those rep ranges. So if our goal is maximal hypertrophy, we're usually doing sets of somewhere around 10 reps. It can be as low as 6, and in certain cases can be as high as 30. But it's usually going to be in about the 6 to 15, 8 to 12 rep range when we're really focusing on trying to build muscle mass. Now that is going to give us some transfer, specifically if you're a less trained individual, to increasing maximal strength and also affecting our endurance and power also. Now when it comes to trying to improve maximal strength, we're typically going to be doing sets of around 5 repetition. Could be as high as that 8 or 10, could be as low as doubles and possibly even singles. But it's going to be a heavier load than what we did for that hypertrophy work. Then when we go over and say we're trying to now emphasize building maximal power, power is done in sets of less than 5 reps or less, typically in the 1 to 3 range, because we're really trying to get that maximum power output and then the nice long full recovery. So we can not just allow for the metabolic recovery, but the full replenishment of ATP and creatine phosphate stores, along with, any metabolic effect or even nervous system fatigue, for lack of a better term, is dissipated before we do our next maximal effort step. So if we're trying to build endurance, now we're going to be talking about sets of 12 or more. You can get all the way up into silliness, madness, and death, aka sets of 50, sets of 100. You can just keep going. The idea is, like anything else, we're doing a lot more effort. And then obviously in order to do that number of repetitions, your percentages, the load needs to go down. Now, there is research showing that you can build muscle mass lifting literally 40% of your max is going to increase muscle mass as long as you take that to failure. But it seems to be the sweet spot for hypertrophy is usually between 60 and 80%. Once you go over 80%, you can't really do enough reps per set to really get that really good hypertrophy stimulus. Plus, it just bangs you up more because it's a much heavier load. And then at the same time, less than 60%, you got to do a lot of reps, and it becomes metabolically relatively daunting. But still, it's still going to give you some effect, because that gets back to where we talked about at the beginning with Jake. and that total volume of work you're doing. And then we're talking about strength. We're usually talking about loads that are over 70% to 90, 95% of our max, but the reps are obviously going to go down as the percentage goes up. And then power, now we're just talking about putting in those maximal efforts. You don't necessarily need to be doing 90% or more of your max. The key is you have to be putting in 95 to 100% of your effort each time into it. So you can be doing box jumps for power production. You can do broad jumps, med ball throws, or you can do things like the Olympic lifts. You can do cleans, snatches, whatever works that is going to give you the stimulus that you're looking for. Now, like anything else, when we're setting up these programs and we're thinking through, okay, what do we need more of? So if we were to go ahead and we'll pick on myself. Have I told you guys about the times that I've gone to like train at Westside Barbell and train at like Ludus Magnus?
No.
Okay, thank you. So Ludus Magnus it's actually named after the original gladiator school in ancient Rome by my friend Matt Wenning. That's in Columbus, Ohio, and so is Westside Barbell. I've trained there a number of times. Westside Barbell has become an incredibly friendly place compared to what it was whenever I first went there. There's only 2 human beings I've ever met in person in my entire life that scared me, that I didn't want to be around. And one of them was definitely Chuck Vogelpohl in 2007. Like seeing him walk around the gym made me think of like if you just woke up inside of the gorilla pen in the zoo. Because like he just walked with like this weird like rage in his eyes, and I was like, I don't want to be anywhere near it. Like I'd keep my head down, like not going to make any sudden movements, try to look small, don't start fights. But dear God, and that's when he was probably squatting like 1,100 to maybe 1,200. God, he's terrifying. But every time I've gone there, I've been made fun of for being too skinny and too light. Now, you guys have obviously seen me before in life. Would any of you guys, if you had to define me as a professor or me as a person in stature as skinny?
Absolutely not.
I'm going to hope that's not you calling me fat, but yes, absolutely.
Muscle.
Because in that world, in order to be a really good power lifter, now mind you, they're also not afraid to use those substances we talked about in chapter 16. They told me that I need to weigh at least a minimum of 220 pounds, which I haven't hit since I was a fat kid in high school. I got to 219 when I first started working at EKU because I was eating my feelings and it was great. Yeah, Norbs. And then I got a really bad brain injury and haven't really gotten that heavy ever since. And then they told me that I probably should be at least 242 pounds to 275 pounds. Like those are weight classes in powerlifting at that time. That's how much weight, or that's how small I am for the sport. So if my goal is to try to be the best power lifter I can be, what do I definitely need to do when it comes to at least part of my resistance training? What do I need to focus on?
Would you want to overload your muscle?
Yeah, obviously I want to overload, but what do I probably want to do? Think about of the basic responses to resistance training, what am I probably looking for in order to become a better strength athlete? And I don't know, maybe the sound cut out when I was talking about it, guys, but the thing that I need to do is I need to gain weight. I'm too small. Does that make sense? Like I literally don't have as much muscle mass as I need to in order to be a really, really good power lifter. I am literally too skinny in the sport of powerlifting. So does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. So what type of rep ranges would you argue that I should probably be working within? Specifically when I'm trying to go up in those weight classes.
Low number reps, like up to 5 with heavy weight.
That's for trying to increase the strength. I need increased muscle mass, Gracie.
Oh, well then, like 8 to 12.
Bingo. So not that there won't be, you go through in what's known as, basic linear periodization. Otherwise, you're going to have a period of time of the year where you're focusing on hypertrophy and a period of time of the year that you're focusing on maximal strength. So you're going to go through parts where you're really focusing on those tens, and then other parts where you then are going to drop the reps down and increase the weight so that you're going to get yourself into a true strength phase, and then you can cycle back and go through again. It's pretty straightforward. It's really not that hard to program out. It's much more difficult to make sure you do. And so when you're working with your athletes or even programming for yourself is, having a good, honest conversation about what that athlete needs. So let's go ahead and pick on her because she's not here. But when it comes to Sam, specifically on the softball team, what would possibly help her based upon just weight room performance to be a better softball player? Other than the pandemic is over so she can go play softball again. Okay. So let's see. Is this just really lagging out on you guys a lot?
No, I can hear you.
Okay, good, Grace. So you're going to hop in with me and we're going to talk our way through it. Does Sam have any issue with the endurance aspect of actually playing the sport of softball?
Like with recovery and stuff, how well she recovers and stuff.
Yeah, like she can hit the ball, run, and then stand on the base until the next pitch and not be like needing oxygen to do it.
Yeah, she can do that well.
Okay, so we probably don't need to worry about that endurance thing. Okay. Is she big enough muscular-wise in order to play the sport of softball?
Yes.
Yeah, not an issue there either. Is she strong enough to play the sport of softball?
Absolutely.
Okay. So now here's the thing. She's powerful enough to play the sport of softball, but increasing that strength is going to also help increase the muscle mass and also increase the power to a certain extent. But if we could just make her have better endurance, make her have a bigger body, hypertrophy through, the mid reps, strength, she's just a little bit stronger, or have her be more powerful, which of those four is actually going to help her the most in playing softball?
The powerful one.
Bingo. So it's not that we're just going to stop doing all of the heavy squatting. It's not that we're going to completely stop doing any of the higher rep stuff specifically for like rotator cuff health and otherwise. The key with her is we're just going to really make the major emphasis of the program be power development, because Lord knows if she can hit that ball harder, run faster, and throw the ball harder, she's going to be a better softball player because she's already got all of the things building up to it pretty darn good. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So, kind of like if you were to decide to ever convert over to being a long distance runner, which you should never do, it turns out you're more than strong enough and powerful enough to be a long distance runner, and you do have more muscle mass than you need to be a good distance runner. So what do you really need to focus on? You probably need to get better running technique, and you need to we just need to focus on the energy systems. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So this is Meant, this is going to sound like a dumb question, guys, but it's something that a lot of people forget about, which is, why don't we just try to build everything all at the same time? And I'm going to pick
Not
up.
as efficient.
You're right, it's not as efficient. Brent, I appreciate that, Gracie, but I'm going to pick on Brent for a few. Why do we want to try to develop all physical capacities at the same time?
One's not like lacking in other aspects as other ones are kind of flourishing. That they're all kind of, you're an equal, well-rounded athlete, not just only one side of your like the strength capacity is better than your aerobic capacity.
Mm-hmm. But what would be the problem if we try to have somebody do a long distance running workout, a anaerobic power workout, a speed workout, a strength workout, a hypertrophy workout, and an endurance workout all on the same day?
There's not enough time in the day to accomplish all those.
And we're not going to probably be able to recover from it because it's going to be a really big stimulus. Make sense?
Yep.
So now if we're trying to get the adaptation we're looking for, and we're trying to build, okay, think of it like you guys have money for, effectively investing. Actually, investing, you do want to diversify, but instead you're trying to invest time into your abilities or your schoolwork. Okay, you've got 2 hours to study, we'll say, every day. Now you can spend effectively, let's say you're taking 5 classes, you can spend 20 odd minutes on each of those classes, which is going to allow you to build the grades in all of them. But if 2 of the classes are a joke, like as long as you show up, you have a pulse and you're not a jerk, you get an A, is it really worth putting the 20 minutes a day into that?
No.
So now if you know those 2 are a joke and you know one of those classes is just kicking your teeth in, what do you think is going to be a better way to invest that time?
Take those 2 20-minute segments you would take those joke classes and put them to that one class that's kicking your teeth in.
Exactly. So that's how you need to think about these programs, which is you can look at an athlete and be like, pound for pound, like how big they are, they're about as strong as they're going to be with that amount of muscle mass. So let's not worry about trying to increase the muscle or trying to increase the strength or increase the power. Let's try to get them a bigger motor. Let's put more emphasis into building a bigger person. And then once they get up to that bigger person, now we can kind of try to maintain the size, and let's spend some time increasing that strength. And once we've increased that strength, now let's bring up that power. So that's why when we're looking at programs, we all have the same 24 hours in the day, 7 days in the week. We can only recover, some of us do recover faster than others, some of us slower than others due to a wide variety of things: sleep, diet, nutrition. Diet, nutrition are the same thing. And then lifestyle stress. But when you're working with your athlete, okay, what should we prioritize in the here and the now that's going to have the biggest carryover to when we're going to compete, whether that's a month away, 6 months away, a year away, etc. And that's why you have phases of training where you really focus on very specific components. Does that make sense to all you guys?
Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you, Brent. And thank you, Gracie. Any other questions that you guys would like me to go ahead and field? Otherwise, we've been rocking for about 50 odd minutes. I'm not going to make you guys stay over and talk for extra. The only last thing I would like to touch on is just when we talk about the body composition, keep in mind, like anything else, what is optimal for each individual is going to be different. We all have effectively, like natural levels of body fat, so to speak, that's more comfortable for us to maintain. By no means am I about to whip my shirt off and walk around with you guys, but like the body comp I'm at right now, I'm not feeling like I'm sacrificing because I don't get to eat in order to maintain my body comp, but I also don't feel like I need to stuff myself full all the time in order to maintain that body comp. Now, if I wanted to be leaner and try to look like a bodybuilder, I would have to start cutting back on calories, so I would be spending more time hungry, and I'd be uncomfortable more frequently. Just like if I wanted to get up to that 220, 240, 275, go for the full-blown plus-size model, that would require a whole lot of eating, which would probably lead to me being uncomfortable, both from just being full all the time, probably sweating a lot more because I'm eating a lot more, and having a larger body size. And so when you're working with your athlete, it's important to figure out, first and foremost, where's the performance at? If the performance is where we want it, then don't touch that body comp. That can be real dangerous. But if you know that they perform better if they had a higher body comp or a lower body comp, it's really important that we go and try to move them in that direction in a safe, slow, and sustainable way, which means we're talking about less than 1% body fat change per week. Like should be more like half to a quarter, and that's still being pretty aggressive in some cases. So with our athletes, and we're talking about manipulating body weight, manipulating body composition, look at the role in the sport and what's going to be really useful. Yeah, it turns out if you're a leaner athlete in a weight class sport, it's going to give you an advantage. Just like if you're an athlete where it's just about just being huge, like an offensive lineman, then yeah, we can sacrifice the body comp and just get real fluffy with added lean mass. Yeah, we're going to also start running some risks for things like diabetes and blood pressure, but we're sacrificing health for performance. That just happens. Now, it's going to be in the middle ground. If you're too lean as an athlete, specifically a combat or contact athlete, you're going to be more likely to get hurt. Just like if you're too heavy, now you've got this extra weight going through all of your joints, which is going to beat you up, which once again is going to increase your risk of getting hurt. So we need to figure out what's the optimal range. That's why in actual high-level football players, your wide receivers and your defensive backs are usually your leanest guys on the field. From there, your offensive linemen, your defensive linemen typically have the higher body fats because they also have the much bigger bodies. But your linebackers and your running backs, a number of them aren't as lean as you'd think. Like, yeah, they might have some ab definition, but they're not doing their laundry with their abs. They have a certain amount of body fat because it also literally works as a cushion. It's going to literally help dissipate the force of all those impacts they're going to get from the sport. And I think that's something that's overlooked by a number of individuals because, a lot of us have been socialized with bodybuilding and especially with the wonders of social media, insane bodies, which some of those have genetic gifts. Some of those have a lot of pharmaceuticals, and a number of them have both in order to give you that frame where it's like, yeah, that's how they look to look pretty. They're not trying to be an insert this type of athlete. And so when it comes to being an insert this type of athlete, well, look at the freaking athletes in the sport. Like, from what I've seen in the lab, we don't have a lot of athletes walking around with a six-pack. We've got some of them, but not a lot of them are. They're young, healthy folks. They have that from slightly, lean to normal body fat ranges, but we don't have a lot of ultra lean folks. And we have a couple folks that would be considered to be overweight through body comp, and they're still D1 athletes. So just keep that in mind. There's a lot of range and a lot of flexibility there. Key is look at performance. So any other questions, comments, concerns for you guys? Nothing?
Nope.
All right, guys. Well, thank you guys for tuning in. Stay safe out there, guys. And please come with more questions. We'll review one more time on Wednesday. Friday, I have no idea what we're going to do because, you guys just need to get that lab in. And as far as I'm concerned, we'll just shut her down and let you guys, sleep in later or, do whatever you guys want to do, unless you guys have questions because, let's not punish yourselves with work. That's why the last lab is meant to be fun. But obviously we're not on campus, so we can't exactly do a pizza party. Unless everyone wants to cook pizza and we can all just, group chat while we eat it. That's not weird. So anyways, guys, stay safe out there. Wash your hands. And, if you ever need any protein powder or anything, shoot me an email. I've been just leaving it outside of Moberly if anybody needs anything. So talk to you later, guys. Bye-bye.